Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Steven Ehrlich, Director of Research for Digital Assets. Steven, I appreciate you coming back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You recently reported that the worlds are colliding between AI and crypto. What can you tell us?
So thanks for the question, Brittany. Yeah, ever since chatbot GPT kind of took the world by storm, the chatbot created by OpenAI, there's been no shortage of efforts in crypto to sort of misappropriate that technology and sort of take advantage of that hype. In most cases, to sell tokens to investors at sky high prices. But I was able to report on one sort of real world example of how these two worlds may actually be colliding, although not necessarily in the way that people think. FalconX, which is a San Francisco based prime broker, and that means that it's kind of like a white glove service that caters to crypto institutional investors like hedge funds and family offices and prop shops and those types of things, by offering access to trading desks and exchanges around the world, offering credit services and loan provisioning, margin, things like that. This company is building a trading bot together with OpenAI on top of ChatGPT, and we believe that this is at least the first reported case of any crypto-focused company cooperating with OpenAI.
What is the goal of this trading bot? That's what I want to talk about. Is this meant for the everyday investor? Is this meant to make crypto and investing more accessible to just the everyday person?
That is kind of what they're saying. And for the story, I spoke with Raghu Yarlagadda, who is the CEO of FalconX, and actually has a lot of experience in machine learning, artificial intelligence, and what we're now calling generative AI. He actually was interviewed by Sundar Pichai, the current Google CEO, and joined his team when Raghu was at Google earlier in his career. And that's what he says. I mean, he talks about the challenges in trying to come up with sophisticated trading strategies, many of which are sort of like quantitatively or rule driven, more commonly known as algorithmic trading or algo trading for short. And today, that often takes a team of coders, developers, sophisticated software, and days, months, of weeks of back testing and all types of things. And his goal with this new product, this trading bot, which he's actually calling Satoshi after Bitcoin's pseudonymous founder, is to make it simple so that at least what he says is anybody can become an algorithmic trader in 10 to 15 minutes. Obviously, that's a big task, and it's not going to be quite that simple. But ultimately, that's where he wants to go with this.
Anyone can become an algorithmic trader in 10 to 15 minutes. I mean, that sounds almost too good to be true. Do you think it is?
Whether or not it's too good to be true for somebody to be an algo trader, I think depends on how you define algo trader, because there are different levels and different degrees of sophistication. I mean, just like in karate, where there's different color belts and the different stripes on belts that denote different levels of experience and sophistication. And it's the same thing here. Like an algo trader could be something as simple as running a simple basis strategy for Bitcoin for a month, where in that case you're exploiting the difference in price between a spot price and a future price with like a month expiry, where you sort of take advantage of the difference, or some sort of arbitrage strategy where, especially for a market that's still disjointed like Bitcoin, where the price might be 1% higher or lower in one jurisdiction, you can kind of buy one place, sell another. Like all of those types of things are algo trading. Obviously, it can get much more sophisticated from there, and these very like high tech hedge funds do that. So it depends on, again, how you define it. But in the case of at least being able to type in a question like, how would my return be different if I ran a basis trading strategy versus a buy and hold strategy, or sort of like what would be the risk weighted return of doing this type of strategy over a 6 month period, assuming these types of conditions, and being able to sort of prompt Satoshi to ask those types of questions without needing to necessarily even know how those types of trading strategies worked or know how to code in order to implement those tests. Those are pretty interesting breakthroughs that haven't really been available to traders quite yet.
I want to dive a little deeper into your point there. You named a few questions you could ask the chatbot. When you think of ChatGPT as a whole, we've been covering, you can ask ChatGPT anything from writing a poem for you, finishing your English paper, asking it really any question. In the
Mhm.
crypto space, what types of questions would you be asking?
Yeah, and that's a good question because there's a few different things that you could ask them. The way that it was described to me by FalconX is that they basically break down a trade into three different functions. There's the pre-trade where you're trying to gather all the different intelligence out there, the reporting, the news, to kind of figure out what you want to do. And one of FalconX's clients who I spoke with for the story talked about how this step is actually very important because in a market like crypto, it's still very news driven, and especially for assets beyond just Bitcoin and Ether. And I have experience. I've seen times where the price of Bitcoin has changed right after a story that I published, and I'm not the only one at Forbes. That's happened to other people too. Granted, they have to be big stories, but it does happen. But for some smaller ones, more esoteric tokens that are not the Bitcoins, the Ethereums, a piece of news or just a social media influencer trade saying something could move that price 5 to 10%. So it's a very news driven market, at least for right now. So having access to that information is helpful. And what you can do here is the same thing you could do on ChatGPT. You could say, what's the most relevant information out there for my portfolio? And obviously this FalconX Satoshi platform would know what your portfolio is. So it could sort of aggregate that and synthesize it into a report that you could get there. And right now ChatGPT's internet background or its history only goes up to about 2021. So FalconX has been able to ingest more accurate data, which is something that I tested with the company when they were doing it then. So you could do that. You could ask it more sophisticated questions like comparing the white papers, which is kind of like I wouldn't say it's a high level document, but it's an introductory document that is somewhat technical to how certain protocols and platforms and blockchains work. I asked it a question about how to compare two different similar white papers and list out the three biggest differences. And it did that in a relatively quick amount of time. So you can do those types of things to get that information. And then ultimately where it's going is that this company is going to be able to, or Satoshi is going to be able to help you backtest trading strategies, which basically means you look at historical data and see how a particular strategy would have done under those conditions. And then from there it'll kind of help generate ideas, like new ideas for how you might want to trade based on these conditions. Or you could give it a hypothetical scenario and say, like, imagine we're in a world where Bitcoin's worth this, interest rates are this, like what are some of the options available to me? And it would at least be able to understand what you're saying and take this big library of information that it has and generate output, generate opportunities. And that's all in like the pre-trade environment. And then once we get to the trade environment and post-trade, you'd actually be able to, in the most mature version of this product, you'd be able to then like click trade or execute or whatever right then and there and put it to action.
Steven, in most of our conversations we've had, we've always touched on how there's a volatility when it comes to crypto. And I know you said that this chatbot has that library of information, but are you afraid in the trading sense, is there some sort of human element that could be lost here in an AI implementation?
You're right, Brittany. There's a lot also for investors to be cautious about when it comes to using products like this. For one, hallucinations, and within the context of generative AI, hallucinations basically mean an instance where the chatbot essentially creates facts and purports them to be true, and just because of the way that text is displayed, it can be very convincing. This can be problematic in a number of circumstances. ChatGPT falsely claimed that a George Washington University law professor was accused of sexual harassment and even invented a Washington Post article in its response as sort of a citation or credibility for that claim. All of that turned out to be false. Within the context of trading, I mean, what people really need to be careful about is making decisions based on the certainty provided by a tool such as Satoshi, which could be wrong, and unless you are a seasoned veteran trader within crypto markets, you may not realize that's a big concern. In addition, I think it's also important to understand that there's a lot more that goes into being a profitable crypto trader than just being able to trade on news and being able to put together algorithmic strategies. And sometimes, even if you do the create and implement the best trading strategies, you still could turn out on a losing end. I mean, for instance, we've spoken numerous times about all of the different levels of leverage and sort of incestuousness between major trading desks and lending firms in crypto, and how when Three Arrows Capital fell in May, it sort of like led to this like series of dominoes where so many other firms ended up crashing as a result because they were all borrowing and indebted to each other. That's nothing that, like for instance, ChatGPT or Satoshi would be able to find out. I mean, I guess theoretically, if they could go and find the information, but all those companies were private, and their balance sheets, their bank records were private. I mean, that's not something that a tool like ChatGPT or again Satoshi would be able to save you from. And something else I think that's important too is, especially for tokens that are just launching early stage products, a lot of the money can be made from like VC firms and other people to get early access to these different tokens and then sell them onto the open market. And again, this is something that like ChatGPT, or excuse me, Satoshi might be able to level the playing field once everything is out in the open. But in this industry, still a lot of what matters is knowing the right people and getting early access to tokens at the right times. Satoshi might be able to help avoid buying into a speculative bubble by showing by responding to queries about previous surging tokens and giving potential traders warnings about what downturns could look like. But at the end of the day, the crypto market is still so, I guess, so jumbled that there are a lot of different potholes that people could step into if they don't know how to use this tool appropriately, or understand or have a warning signal to figure out if they are being fed incorrect information.
I've had a lot of conversations with people throughout different industries, and they all say that ChatGPT and this AI is the way of the future. One person, Mark Penn, I was discussing with him the arms race between Microsoft and Google, and he said, this is the best invention since the smartphone. It's the invention of the decade. And it's interesting that AI is really getting into the crypto space. But as someone who's really in the weeds of the industry, knows more about crypto than anyone I've ever talked to, do you think this is a really good pairing?
I appreciate you saying that. So the pairing between AI and crypto, I think there are areas where they can be complementary, but the idea that they necessarily have to go hand in hand is false. I mean, think about it. The reason why OpenAI had to raise $10 billion from Microsoft is because of the gargantuan computing bills that it costs to run a project as sophisticated as ChatGPT. And blockchains are wonderful in a number of ways. They're in many ways they're trustless, they're censorship resistant, they're often secure. They're append only. Hopefully they're immutable, but they're not necessarily fast, and they don't have a lot of excess data capacity. And those are two things that you really need for something like generative AI to work at scale. ChatGPT is great. Satoshi, from the brief demo that I saw, seemed great. But if you have to wait 12 hours to get a response to a query, that's not going to do you a lot of good, especially if you're in an industry like trading. So for crypto and AI to really merge together in a way that isn't cheating and uses both of these two technologies or industries in the ways that they're meant to, we're going to have to see significant steps forward in terms of scalability and throughput on the side of blockchains.
Obviously, we're in the early stages, but when can you see this really making strides?
It's hard to tell. I mean, we are in the very, very early stages of this, and it's not just, it's both industry. I mean, generative AI is something that is, although it's been on the radar for years, and its breakthrough moment just came, and I think it's hard to at this point, it's very hard to overstate just how big the implications for this could be, from professions like journalism to law to marketing to you name it. And in crypto and blockchains, it's been around for 15 years, but it's still trying to find that aha moment in a lot of ways. When we're talking about scalability for blockchains, I mean, Bitcoin and Ethereum only handle a handful of transactions a second. Ethereum just completed a major upgrade, which should be a major stepping stone to being able to handle about 100,000 transactions per second. There's other blockchains out there that are competitive with Ethereum, like Solana and Algorand and Cardano and Polkadot and Cosmos, and you name it, that all can handle transaction throughput akin to what you might expect from a Visa or MasterCard. And now we're seeing this new type of technology. It's almost like layer two blockchains that sort of are complementary and sit on top of Ethereum, and they have these new types of approaches to rolling up data into more efficient packets called rollups. And we're seeing this new tech called ZK Snarks, essentially a fancy way of compressing data again to make it more scalable. So, but a lot of these main nets are still waiting to launch. So I know this answer is probably a little bit herky-jerky, but I think it also just speaks to how new this problem is. I think this speaks to how hard this problem is trying to solve. And at least when it comes to crypto, I think it also is a reflection of the fact that maybe blockchains aren't supposed to be that fast. I mean, one solution could be doing some of these major computations off-chain and then anchoring them on chain from time to time. That's how, like, for instance, certain derivatives exchanges and decentralized exchanges on blockchain work. They do a lot of the heavy lifting off chain, and then from time to time post those transactions that, like, the net values of those transactions on chain. Maybe that's something that AI can do as well, but it's very hard to try to find a way for these two technologies to work together when they're both still finding themselves.
I think the response to AI has been everything from excited to apprehensive to, is this taking over the world? Is this taking over my job? What has the response been when it comes to AI and crypto?
Honestly, within crypto, I think there's been a few responses. For one, which I am ashamed to say, is that there's a certain degree of, I would say, like, charlatans or just opportunistic people looking to take advantage of the hype to sell tokens and make money. On the other hand, I mean, there is a significant majority of folks that are looking to figure out ways that are looking to figure out the implications of this for the industry. And now that AI has had this breakthrough moment, trying to determine where this can fit in within, like, the canon of blockchain development. And but at this point, I think that's kind of where we're at. I do think it's noteworthy, though, that there have been some people in crypto that have pushed back against efforts to sort of put a pause on the development of OpenAI and ChatGPT. I think we saw, what was it, a week or two ago, about how a number of executives penned a letter asking for OpenAI to, I think, pause new releases or something for 6 months. And the CEO of Coinbase, Brian Armstrong, argued against this and said that was not the right way to do things, and more or less pointing out that technology is going to develop as it develops, and this pause is not necessarily going to be sufficient for regulators to know how to handle this technology moving forward, and that basically these things have to be allowed to develop concurrently. So I think that's also an important point to mention.
Steven Ehrlich, thank you for joining me.
Great. Thanks, Brittany.